something happened in the candidates that was tailor-made for this is Gukesh talked about the turning point in the tournament. And I'd love to get your take on this, Fabi. The turning point in the tournament for him, he said, was when he actually lost his game to Ali Racing, right? Like he felt like this was when he was really upset, but then afterwards he settled himself and he felt like he was playing well and that everything was going to be okay. And he felt more than anything that that was the turning point for him. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that because I talk about losing, and the subtitle losing, and you will lose because we all are going to lose games. Losing is such a big part of the learning process and even a big part of any individual tournament. Like sometimes you lose a game and people just get derailed. I remember I lost the second game of the tournament that gave me my final GM norm. It was against Greg Shahadi, and it was on my birthday. I had drawn the first game, and I lost the second one. And that could have just been devastating and completely derailed my tournament. But it was calming myself down and actually talking to my friend Willie Johnson, who we just had a big talk around everything for those 2 hours. And I got to a place where I was like, you know what? Okay, I just lost that game. And then I went on to win like 5 out of 6 and get my norm with a round to spare, my norm and title with a round to spare. So the reaction to losing is such an integral part of being a professional. But I think a lot of people, when they lose, and I make this final point, Kobe Bryant, who I quote in my book, the late, great Kobe Bryant, said that for him, losing is exciting, which nobody would expect him to say. He said losing was exciting because it showed him what to work on. And so I'd love to hear your take on that, Bob.
Yeah, actually, I wasn't too surprised when I heard him say it because I felt something rather similar. Like it gave me a bit of deja vu from 2018 when I lost to Karyakin. And of course, I think there's like a little bit of, speaking with hindsight also when you're the winner of the candidates and it's like everything has gone well and you say, okay, this was the turning point. Of course, things could have gone very differently, right? It might have actually been a really important loss for him. There was that scenario. But when I thought back to 2018, I lost to Karyakin. And of course, it was a very costly loss at the time when I lost him in the 12th round. And it could have basically meant that I wouldn't win the tournament, even though I was leading before that. But I had noticed that my play leading up to that game had been a little bit, you could call it maybe tight, or you could call it reserved. You could even maybe use a more strong term and say that I was playing in a cowardly fashion. Like I was trying to keep my lead and protect it and not playing naturally and, freely, let's say. So I felt like I was a little bit trapped in that trying to protect my lead. And then after I lost, suddenly I actually had to win. And my play just like vastly improved after that when I actually had to win. And then I went for it and I wasn't really thinking, oh no, I can't lose. I have to protect my lead. I can't possibly lose a game and then jeopardize the tournament. Then my play freed up and it got much better. So I thought back on that. I'm not sure if he would say it was like the same feeling that he was perhaps not playing well before that. But I did think back to that. It sounded a bit familiar. Although when it comes to these things, of course, it's like, yeah, you don't win the tournament and then you can't possibly say this, right? It's very much depends on a lot of factors that things actually worked out perfectly for him. Then maybe he looks back on that game. But if it hadn't worked out perfectly, he might look back on that game and think, how could I lose that game? And I could have won it and beat Frusian and potentially won the tournament like that. So yeah, tournaments are also a lot of circumstance, right? You never know exactly what will be important. But yeah, sometimes losing can be freeing because you kind of realize that you're there to play for a win. You're not there to not lose, right? You don't win tournaments by not losing games. You win tournaments by winning games.
But see, sorry, you finished.
No, go ahead.
No, but I think that's such a big point, and that's why I write about it, because you see it happen at every level. You see, my favorite sport is basketball, and of course, go Knicks. But when you watch these professionals who are making millions of dollars, like millions of dollars, right? And they have to handle losing versus like on a regular basis, whether you're up 2 and then suddenly you lose 2 games and now the season or the series is tied and the attitude that you have to be able to mentally deal with this loss and not feel like you're going to be devastated by the loss. And I think that those who handle those situations best are the ones who end up victorious. And to train yourself, whatever happens, whatever the storyline could have been, to train yourself to accept and even embrace losing. Like, just like, it happened. It happened. What did I do wrong? What do I need to do differently? And move on from there. And I think that that's one of the hardest lessons of all, is losing as a topic and mistakes as a topic. Not getting down on yourself, not being sour on yourself, having that Mamba mentality that Kobe had when he said, yeah, losing is exciting. I mean, you don't even expect those words to come out of his mouth. Like, losing is exciting. What do you mean? I remember Irina Krush said to me that somebody told her, celebrate your losses. Celebrate your losses. When I said that to Yasser, he was like, celebrate? Are you crazy? Hate your losses. What are you talking about? Celebrate your losses. But the idea that your losses are your teachers, and the idea that it shows you, you got stuff to work on, and what do you need to do next? How do you overcome this? It's a challenge. And I think that's such a big topic that so many people are derailed when they lose. And yet, when you look at Garry Kasparov, I remember when he was so dominant in the 90s, whenever he lost a game, and he did, I really felt sorry for the next person he played. Because Garry never pouted after a loss. I mean, he was stomping mad, like, what? No way. He'd go evaluate, and you just knew he was coming back to crush his opponent the next game. It even happened in his World Championship match against Anand. Of course, Anand fell into some theory as well. But he lost game 9, and there went game 10, and he just completely demolished Anand from that moment. After they had drawn 8 games in a row, he loses, and then, boom, he hits him, and then he just keeps hitting him every game. Bam. I think Anand had one draw after that, and everything was just a train running over him from that moment, because he didn't handle the losing very well, even though the score was tied. So I think handling losses is such a core part of being a great competitor.
No, I think it's just
absolutely.
Go ahead, Fabi.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we tend to be very results oriented, which is just very natural, because we all want to win our tournament, or we want to, whatever your goal is, right? We mentioned goals before, and some goals are extremely important to us, right? They feel like the world, and when we feel like we're on the cusp of getting them, then it can change how we play, potentially to our detriment. And generally speaking, I know it's like probably either difficult to impossible to achieve this fully, but to be completely like, to not even think about the results can also be very useful. To just play as though the previous results didn't matter, and the result of the tournament is not life-changing. Just to play as if you're playing any tournament can be extremely useful if you can actually achieve that. And of course, I didn't win the candidate, so I'm not going to say this as like a lesson of how to win a tournament. But when I did lose to Hikaru, my play did improve after that, because I think that before I lost to Hikaru, I was thinking like, okay, everything's very tight, and we were discussing all these scenarios like, okay, I'm +1, they're +2, and getting to +3, and maybe +3 is enough to win the tournament, maybe it's +4, but and then you go to 50%, and everyone's way ahead of you, and you stop thinking about, you're like, okay, my chance of winning the tournament objectively is not very high now, right? So let's not think about that anymore. Let's just think about how to win one game at a time. Mm-hmm. And after that, my play just like really improved for quite a while, up until the last game, and even
the last game, right?
Yeah, even for most of the last game, until I until I messed it up in a pretty spectacular fashion. But everything I did, mostly from my loss up to the end of the tournament, was like more or less correct. And so that loss, of course, it wasn't good. It was costly in one sense, but if I hadn't lost it, would I have found it within myself to beat Firouzja, to beat Vidit, to beat Prague? You really don't know. Of course, we can only speculate, but the psychology of it, like the psychology of how you approach losses, of how you approach tournaments in general, of how we tend to, like, another very interesting thing, this is not going to be personal to me, it's just going to be like, for anyone watching, if you witness any match, there's always a very interesting dynamic. If someone loses, they very, very often tend to win on demand. And I'm thinking, like, why is that? Because what are my chances, for example, of beating a 2750 player with black? It's probably not too high. But when that person suddenly feels the pressure of the match weighing on them and the potential match victory, they start to get much worse. And this applies to me as well. I start to play worse if I need a draw. And to other players, I don't even know if it's avoidable, because I see it has happened to Magnus. Like, you see Magnus very often losing on demand when he's up in a match.
But it also narrows your options, right? When you're in the position that you have to win on demand, it narrows your option. You know what your goal is. You know what you have to do to get to your desired result. We've seen it recently, for example, with Magnus, right, in Poland. He was 2.5 points behind Wei going in the last round. He knew exactly what he had to do. He had to win pretty much every single game. He said that every single game was the must-win game for him. He couldn't fool around anymore. And most of the top players and the top competitors are taught and know how to achieve that next level when necessary. When they are in that situation, it's a mindset. It's a trained reaction as well, and it's an extremely important factor of a top player, a top competitor.
And the funny thing is that if you try to emulate that at the start of a tournament,
good luck.
Like if you try to just steamroll your opponent at the start, it just doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
But if you do it when you have to, then very often it works.
And the question is, can you get into that mindset on demand? Can you have that nervous energy? And I had to say, I saw that in Kasparov. I saw that in Kasparov. Like, every single game he played, you could see his emotions on his face. You could see how desperately he wanted to win that game, and he would just show it. He'd be walking around like a tiger, just prowling, like. And he's just so intently into the game, like everything was on the line for this game. But the thing was that he wanted to win the game. Like, that's what his thought was. White, black, he didn't care what color. He always felt like it was critically important that he won that game. He wasn't there to make draws. He wasn't there to be your friend. He wasn't there to micromanage how he was going to win the tournament. He wanted to win +6, +7, +8, +9, whatever the biggest result was. That's what he was in for, to prove that he was the best. And I think that like, ultimately that's a different kind of mindset. I was thinking about the flip side of that, which is when you lose, when you think you're going to win because of momentum. And this happens to all of us, that we get better positions that look like, this is just such a great position. This is over, and I call it winning in the illusion of momentum. Like, I'm just winning. Right. And what is the funniest joke to me? You stand outside of a tournament hall. Just stand outside and wait, and somebody's going to walk out. I was winning. Like, yeah, you were, weren't you? It's just a joke. It's just a running joke that we chess players, you were winning, then you relaxed because you thought you were winning, and then the game flipped around, and maybe you didn't even draw the game. Maybe you even lost the game. And to keep that mindset, you see it again in sports all the time. Basketball team could be up 25 points, and they're like, yeah, whatever. And they start going through the motions. And all of a sudden, the other team, with their backs to the wall, they have to do everything they can to come back. All of a sudden, the comeback starts. And then once that tide turns, suddenly that 25-point lead turns into 20, turns into 15, now it's 10. And now they're trying to get back to that same energy that got them the 25-point lead in the first place, and they can't get it back.
There's additional pressure now. There's additional pressure now as well.
Right. Before there was none, you could relax, because we go into the sloth brain. Like, I can relax now. I can chill. It's over. Look at them. We're just overwhelming them. It's so easy. And then, bam. And I mean, I've experienced it. I know you two have experienced it. Definitely. It's just part of the process, and to try to maintain that focus throughout, as though it's the same score, right? Or the position is equal, or you're slightly worse, even though you're much better. Because winning a chess game is the hardest part. Actually converting that win is actually the hardest part. And you got to focus, because if you screw up a win, nothing feels worse than screwing up a one position, right? You could lose, but nothing feels worse than like, I was just completely crushing you and then I lost the game. Like, that's just the nastiest thing to happen.
But the interesting thing is that it's not the hardest thing in terms of like an objective, for an objective reason, right? It's like the things in chess which are really difficult, we wouldn't say it's like the position I had against Jan. That's not, it's like, okay, that's easy, whatever. But what ends up being difficult is that, as you mentioned, we relax. So it's not because of the position, it's because of our own mentality. And yeah, it's really tough to avoid that relaxation, because you have to avoid it, but it just happens. And you don't know when, right? You might suspect that at some point you might relax. It might have happened a million times before, but you don't know when it'll happen. And then it'll just be something minor, like, okay, this move looks good, and I don't spend the extra like 10 seconds, and I just miss this one detail,